Hello friends, this is Christopher Davis-Shannon, and today I'm going to put down my ukulele because the reality of the situation is, for most of us, we have to work jobs and raise families and run errands, and we can't have our uke in our hands the vast majority of the time. But that doesn't mean we can't still practice. So let's look at 7 different ways that we can practice music as well as ukulele without our instrument. The first thing that we can do may seem very obvious, but it's something that I notice a lot of beginner players skip over, and this is something you should be doing when you're learning an instrument, regardless of whether you have it in your hands or not, and that is listen to music. You need to listen to music. It's a large part of learning how to play music. But when I say listen to music, I don't mean just put on music in the background and go on with your daily life. I mean active listening in music. Turning on a recording and honing in on what the rhythm instrument is doing. If that's a ukulele, even better. And we can listen to the sound of that instrument, the rhythms that are being applied, the notes that are being used to help ourselves, when we get back to our instrument, better integrate those things that we enjoy hearing into our own playing. Every day you should be setting yourself aside just a few minutes to listen to a little bit of music, but not to casually listen, to actively listen. And I'm going to link below to my video on figuring out chords and basic ear training, which goes a little bit further in depth into this concept of active listening. The reality of the situation is we're never without an instrument. All of us has an instrument built into our bodies that we can utilize every single day, even if we never touch our other instruments. And that is the human voice. All of us can sing. And before you tell me that you're tone deaf and you cannot sing, less than 1% of the population is actually tone deaf. It's very, very rare to be tone deaf. Most of us just do not sing enough and thus don't have enough control over our vocal cords to be able to hit the pitches accurately. And you know how we get better at that? Practice. For people that drive a lot, if you have a commute, one of the best things you can do musically is to just sing along with what you are listening to. One of my favorite exercises in the car is to put on recordings of old jazz records and scat my solos, even though I don't scat solos at shows because, quite frankly, it's not something that I've really gone far into enough that I feel that I'm good at. But it's a way that I can audiate my solos that I would generally play on an instrument and get those ideas out of my head without ever needing an instrument in my hand. But on the other hand, it also removes one of the obstacles when you're thinking about soloing or even playing a melody, which is applying it to the instrument. That extra technique is an extra step that we take and makes it harder. The old adage that my bass teacher used to always tell me, especially with solos, if you can't sing it, you can't play it. Every day, just practice a little bit of singing. Even if you never want to do it in front of everyone in your entire life, it doesn't matter. It's something that will help you on your instrumental journey, probably more than anything else. Whenever we're learning an instrument, that's really just one thing that we're learning, right? Whenever we practice an instrument, we're actively practicing 2 things. We're practicing the technique on that instrument, how we make the sounds come out, but we're also practicing musical concepts. And musical concepts really have nothing to do with the instrument themselves. One thing that I always stress with my students is ear training, or being able to hear different melodies and play them without needing a tab. But one of the ways that I like to start with this is with chord quality training, or just hearing whether chords are major or minor. And this is something that you can do very easily outside of your instrument. I use this app, as you can see right here, called Earmaster, and I use this every morning when I wake up just to start my day off with finding some chords and listening to them and setting myself up. And I also do this when I'm waiting for things. I was getting my oil changed the other day and had my headphones in, identifying intervals. This is something you can do. It's an absolutely free app, and there's many other websites that I'll link to below that have similar tools to this. But it's great to separate some of your musical training from your instrument training because it's all going to apply to the instrument when we get it back in our hands. A great exercise to do when we can't be at our instrument is to just visualize the motions that we need to play that instrument. When we talk about things such as muscle memory, this repetition of a specific movement that we do to make it become instinctual, we're thinking about not really memory that's in our fingers, but memory that's up here and developing the brain impulses to tell our fingers to do the right things. There was a Harvard study years ago that took 3 groups of pianists, and one of them didn't practice, one of them practiced at the piano, and one of them practiced their music by just looking at it and going through the motions without a piano. And it ended up, after the week, the control group that didn't practice didn't get any better. What a surprise. But the progress between the other 2 groups was nearly identical. Now, if you're a beginner on the instrument, it's important to have the instrument in your hands so you can check yourself for proper technique. But once we have the basics down, just visualizing a song that you are playing and the movements that your hand needs to make those chords or those notes come out can in fact be just as effective as sitting there with the instrument in your hand. And again, we're removing the obstacle of the technique of the instrument itself. If you want to take visualization even further, you can even finger as you would on a instrument, on your arm or on your leg or on a pencil. It doesn't really matter, but you can still get those physical movements in as well with the visualization to help internalize music that you're working on when you can't have your instrument with you. Now, this next tip is a little bit harder and for the more advanced players among us. Once we get more into playing music, you'll find that your sight reading is better. When you look at a piece of music, you can play a lot of things without really needing to practice it a lot. And that's because we've already solved a lot of the basic problems. A lot of music is based around scales and arpeggios that we learn when we're starting out on the instrument. As we start to recognize them in pieces of music, we can hear them in our head. This is something that I love to do on airplanes when I'm just stuck without anything to do for hours, is I bring my iPad with scores of music on it and I can look at the music and go through and hum and also visualize where on my instrument these notes would be located. And that, much like with visualization, really helps us learn the music without even having the instrument, because we're still going through the motions and our brain is processing what we need to do on the instrument in any given time by just reading the music that we're already familiar with and going through the steps of how we would apply that to the instrument. This next one is my absolute favorite, and if you've been following my channel for a while, you know that I really harp on how important rhythm is over anything else in music. And part of the reason for this is in my musical journey early on, rhythm was my weakest thing and something that I have worked really hard on. But also on ukulele, we have a very limited range. So a lot of the music does come from how we apply rhythm and groove with the right hand to our instrument. But again, rhythm itself is a musical concept. It actually has nothing to do with ukulele. We just apply it to ukulele so that other folks can hear the rhythm. So we think about musical concepts, we can remove this from the instrument, again, removing one of the barriers of difficulty from learning this. And my favorite way to learn new rhythms, and this goes for strumming patterns if you like to learn new strumming patterns, is to simply take a walk. You could sit at home with a metronome, but the joy of taking a walk is we all walk with a very natural cadence. It is not disjointed. We walk with a specific pulse. And that's just as good as learning with a metronome. So let your walk be your pulse, be your beat. And if you're doing, say, a rhythm such as the island strum, 1, 2, and 4, and 1, 2, and 4, or if we're thinking it in strumming terms, it's down, down, up, down, 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 up, down, up. So if you're learning a new rhythm, take a walk and let the beat be there, by when your feet hit the pavement and vocalize out loud those rhythms or the motions that your hand is making if you're not comfortable with saying rhythms themselves as you walk down the street. And I highly recommend doing this as loudly as possible. If you want to be a musician, it's very important to be eccentric and for everyone in your neighborhood to think that you are absolutely insane. Now, this last tip is something to do right after you put down your instrument. As many of you know, how we really learn is when we're sleeping. When we sleep, our brain has time to process all those activities that we've done throughout the day, all those repetitions we've done on the instrument. And that's what commits it to our long-term memory and gives us that concept of muscle memory, of being able to do things instinctually instead of actively thinking about what we're doing on the instrument. But a brief rest period after we play also helps with this. And some people recommend meditation for this, and I do meditate myself. But for this to work, and there have been studies done about this, is all you really need to do is when you get done practicing, when you get done the work for the day, put your instrument down and close your eyes for 1 to 5 minutes and sit in silence. Because what happens in that period is that your brain actually replays the motions that you were just doing backwards. And that helps us internalize these new concepts. Then when you go to sleep at night, your brain has even more time to process these new concepts. Never forget that when we're practicing and when we're learning new skills, rest is one of our best friends. The time that we spend behind the instrument is only a small part of our journey. So take a little bit of time this week, if you're ever feeling bored, and try out one of these concepts and see if we can push ourselves to learn a little bit more music away from our instruments. I'll see y'all next week.